Hello, my beautiful doves. Welcome back. So today I'm going to be doing a highly requested video. I feel like I said that exact thing like 2 videos ago, but I've been listening to everyone and I thought it'd be appropriate because of the holiday season to do a costume analysis, historical costume analysis on Little Women, the 2019 version. I really love this movie narratively. It's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. I just thought it was really well done. I loved the timeline, skipping back and forth, the color grading, the chemistry between members of the cast. I thought it was a lot better than the 1994 version.
Teddy, don't.
I just have, you know, a tiny little minuscule
little
problem really, and that's
the costumes.
So everyone who knows me knows I'm mostly a fan of Jacqueline Durran's work. Like, I loved her work in Atonement and Anna Karenina, but this movie was kind of a miss for me when it came to costumes. I also want to talk a little bit about the 1994 Little Women in this costume analysis because I watched that movie for the first time recently, and the costumes were totally different. The costume designer for that Little Women is Colleen Atwood, and if you're not familiar with Colleen Atwood, she has done a number of different things like Chicago, A Series of Unfortunate Events, the newest live-action Little Mermaid she's working on, and she also designed the Black Parade uniforms for My Chemical Romance. So for background information, Little Women takes place in the US, in the North, during the Civil War. So to get a sense of what fashion was like at the time. In the early 1860s, we see really big skirts. These skirts were especially voluminous because of the invention of the cage crinoline, or the hoop skirt, as some people call it, in the 1850s, which was this cage-like frame worn underneath the skirt. The silhouette of the skirt by the mid-1860s was kind of pyramid-shaped, flatter at the front and fuller at the back. Day dresses could be composed of a one-piece garment or a separate matching bodice and skirt. By the end of the 1860s, waistlines rose, skirts were less full, and they were gored instead of gathered. In the early 1870s, we see skirts which were looped or draped at the back. Women started to wear bustles to create more fullness in the back as well. Jacqueline Durran said that she tailored each sister's look to the character's idea of who she is becoming. And if we look at the clothing colors, we can see that each sister has her own palette. While I think color coding the characters is a fun idea, it doesn't really make sense narratively. So the Marches are depicted as a family of modest means. They're not like dirt poor, they still can afford a maid, but they're definitely, I would say, not as comfortable as other families in the area. Most girls and women at the time only owned a few dresses, and they would just rotate between those 2 or 3 dresses. And if you came from a family of sisters, then the younger sisters would wear hand-me-downs from their older sisters. If you design a color palette for each individual sister, that implies that each sister has her own clothes, like her own new clothes, which doesn't make sense economically. But let's just see why Durran gave each sister a color palette. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Durran said that she designed a red and indigo blue palette for Jo to represent Jo's energy, creativity, and masculinity. Meg wears a green and lavender color palette inspired by the Gothic revival and pre-Raphaelite and William Morris paintings. Durran did this because Meg is supposed to be the practical and romantic sister. Beth is put in soft pinks, plum purples, and browns. Durran wanted to dress Beth in homier clothing as she never makes the leap from childhood to adulthood. Beth's wardrobe is pretty drab in color and also carries this air of gloominess. For Amy, Durran put her in light blues and rich tones because Amy is the showiest and most image-conscious of the sisters. Also, Amy goes to Paris, which was the epicenter of high fashion at this time, so Durran had her adopt Impressionist-inspired fashion. So the color palettes do make sense and, in a way, help us understand each sister and her personal journey a little bit more. Especially as over time, Jo and Meg's clothing gets a little bit more lackluster in saturation, and that's kind of to show their personal journey growing into adulthood and facing adversity. Amy stays in her vibrant colors throughout the movie, and my justification for that is that she is like the most sheltered sister. So, you know, even at the end, she kind of just ends up with the guy that she's always wanted. She gets to go to Paris, etc. In contrast, Little Women 1994 had pretty underwhelming costumes, but they're way more accurate. We see the girls wearing the same dresses over and over again, and they're all in pretty much the same hues and tones, with the exception of Amy's Paris dresses. Another nice detail in the 90s Little Women is how we see the girls wearing each other's clothing. When Amy is a little bit older, we can see her wearing the same dress that Meg was going to wear to the Moffats ball. Sure, none of the sisters have their own colors, but the use of dress in this adaptation harks to the March's financial situation and is a more realistic portrayal of a real-life 1860s family. It's kind of up to personal preference on whether you want the clothes to reflect characters more or to reflect the environment more and give better background context for the story. But I think after rewatching both Little Women's, both costumes designers made the right decision for their movie. Little Women 2019 gave fuller storylines to all the sisters, whereas Little Women 1994 really only focused on Jo's journey. If you want to give each sister a proper, equally cared for storyline, then having their clothes reflect who they are is a great way to help add to the film. But if you're mainly focusing on one girl, then it doesn't really matter what her sisters are wearing. They don't need to stand out because they're not supposed to. But something that might sway you to Team 90s is that in an interview with the Daily Dot, Jacqueline Duran said that to work out the economics of their clothes, they purposely used cheaper fabrics like cotton and linen. That sounds like it would make sense, but we have to remember that this movie takes place during the Civil War in the North. And during this time, cotton prices shot up in the North because cotton was produced in the South by slaves. According to economist David Surdam in his article Traders or Traders, Northern Cotton Trading During the Civil War, cotton merchants could cheaply get cotton from the South and sell it up north and turn a huge profit. Charles Gold, a New York resident in 1864, described the potential profits from trading cotton. For $100 in greenbacks, which was the US currency during the war, you could buy a 400-pound bale of cotton in the South. That same bale would be worth $500 in greenbacks in New York. So, can the Marches afford new cotton dresses for each sister? Probably not. The 90s version, once again, is more concerned with historical accuracy because even though the girls are shown wearing cotton dresses in the summer sequences, Atwood made sure to put little holes in the dresses and basically show like physical visual markers of repair to imply that these dresses had been heavily worn and probably were owned for a longer time. The 90s version also had bonnets. And you know, I trust Duran's fashion history knowledge. I definitely think that she knew that bonnets were all the rage in the 1860s. So I took it upon myself to kind of figure out why there were no bonnets in the 2019 version. And I found this article in the New York Times with an interview with Greta Gerwig. And she is quoted to say, "I didn't use any bonnets because I don't love bonnets. I just don't like them. I feel like I'm allowed to not do things I don't like." Ugh. I mean, okay, I understand what she's trying to say, but at the same time, I just don't understand why directors choose to do movies in time periods when they clearly do not like the aesthetics of that time period. And yes, I'm looking directly at Joe Wright for Pride and Prejudice. But even so, they could be wearing hoods, which were fashionable winter headwear. It just is not right for them to have bare heads in the cold. And I'll get to the dresses more specifically in a little bit, but let's talk about the undergarments. In the interview with the Daily Dot, Duran said that she let her actresses choose whether or not they wanted to wear corsets. And I don't know why costume designers let their actors choose whether or not to wear corsets, because I think unless they do a whole PowerPoint presentation on what was appropriate attire back then, I feel like most actors will forego the corset if they have a choice to. So if we run down the actresses very quickly in their decisions, Saoirse Ronan decided to forego the corset for Jo. Emma Watson decided to wear the corset occasionally for Meg. Eliza Scanlon decided to forego the corset for Beth. And Florence Pugh, God is a Woman, decided to wear her corset all times for Amy. But wait, don't throw any tomatoes at the actresses because I do want to raise a point first. I am normally all for corset wearing if we're going to do a period piece before the 20th century, but there is an urban legend, or maybe there's a fact. The thing is, I couldn't really find a source for this, but so many different people said this that I guess it's true in some capacity. I don't know. But Louisa May Alcott's parents were against corset wearing. And apparently, Gerwig and Durand were working under that assumption as well. Louisa May Alcott also wrote a novel called Eight Cousins, and there's some corset discourse in the book, with one character saying, "Nature knows how to mold a woman better than any corset maker, and I won't have her interfered with. My dear Clara, have you lost your senses that you can for a moment dream of putting a growing girl into an instrument of torture like this?" In the Little Women novel, during the chapter when Meg goes to the Moffats' ball, Alcott writes, "They laced her in a sky blue dress which was so tight she could hardly breathe. And then after dancing for a bit with Laurie, Meg actually has to sit down because of the breathing issues." It's safe to assume then that Louisa held similar beliefs about corsets as her parents and probably didn't wear them unless she had to.
It is my opinion that young girls are no different than boys in their need for exertion. Feminine weakness and fainting spells are the direct result of our confining young girls to the house, bent over their needlework and restrictive corsets.
So I guess the no corsets get a pass in this movie. Other undergarment issues include the fact that none of the girls are seen wearing hoop skirts. And this one is less forgivable because even women's rights activists at the time wore hoop skirts. The hoop skirt was considered a feminist advancement because women no longer were constricted by the layers and layers of heavy petticoats that they had to wear before. And regardless of how much Gerwig wanted to stretch the hippie thing, the Marches probably would wear hoop skirts. In a March 1863 issue of Godey's Ladies' Book, one journalist writes, "We see some hoopless individuals perambulating our streets, and queer oddities they are." The 90s Little Women definitely wins in this regard. In an interview with LA Times, Atwood said that it took half an hour for everyone to get dressed because they all wore corsets, camisoles, bloomers, stockings, hoop skirts, and petticoats. We also see Joe wearing red drawers in the house and Amy wearing pink pantalettes at the beach. This is just totally impractical, and you would think that Marmee is the beacon of practicality. Undergarments were almost always white because they were heavily laundered, and it just wouldn't make sense for you to wear colored drawers because the colors would fade. Now we can move on to the clothing details. At the beginning of the movie, Jo is in New York. She's trying to establish herself as a writer, and she's wearing a men's shirt, a waistcoat, and a skirt. According to Durand, she didn't want Jo to give up her boyish qualities, even as a woman in the city. And you know what? I'm not mad about that. I'm generally not mad at any of Jo's fashion choices in the film because she's supposed to be a very unconventional character. However, I noticed that in the Little Women 1994 version, Jo is dressed way more feminine, and I think that was a choice to make her seem more respectable in society. Now, I understand why Gerwig and Durand decided to keep Jo in men's clothing, but again, if this was a realistically historical scenario, women who appropriated menswear would not be looked upon favorably at all. And if Jo wanted to be taken seriously as a writer and not have the publisher door slam in her face, then she would have to make concessions with her personal style. Oh, and just one more thing to point out about the shirts. Jo does wear a lot of two-piece blouses and skirts, which is conceptually period accurate. We start to see more of those as an alternative to dresses in the mid-1800s. However, she should be wearing a Garibaldi shirt, named after the Italian revolutionary Garibaldi. They were loose-fitting shirts that resembled men's shirts and became fashionable among European and American women. They could be white or red, but red was highly fashionable and would also fit well with Jo's color scheme. In 1862, Godey's Lady Book said that the Garibaldi shirt was, quote, "a change amounting to revolution in ladies' costume." So with that said, it makes even less sense for Jo to be wearing men's shirts. These Garibaldi shirts were considered a breakthrough in feminist advancements when it comes to clothing, and it's almost like Jo is 2 steps ahead of the feminists of the time, and, that just doesn't make any sense. Jo also wears trousers, it looks like, underneath her skirt in the sequence. Again, it makes sense for her character, but people would absolutely publicly ridicule her. In the 1994 version, Jo wears bloomers when she goes ice skating, which makes more sense because it was more acceptable for women to wear pants when they were doing sports.
Josephine March, you walked all the way from Walden Pond in only these bloomers?
At the end of the day, despite my grapples with menswear, narratively I like that Jo borrows a lot of Laurie's clothes. It definitely makes sense for the relationship and is a good fallback reason as to how Jo acquires so much menswear throughout the movie. As for Amy, Durand said that her Parisian outfits were inspired by the painters she was painting, so Monet and Manet. Her ball gown is a very dark color, which is inaccurate. Only married women would wear dark colors. Young women, like Amy, would wear pastel bright colors, similar to how Meg is dressed at the Moffats ball. I read an interview with Durand where she said she wanted to distinguish between the 3 balls. The first one is more of like a rural country ball of well-to-do farmers, and she wanted to feel cozy and festive with Christmassy color schemes and plaid dresses. The second ball, Meg's ball, is one of high American society, full of excited, pretty young girls, so pastels and vibrancy is everywhere. The third ball, Amy's ball, is in Paris at the center of couture, and so she wanted a more chic, richer color scheme. And look, I understand that, I'm just saying it's not accurate. I would argue that Amy's Paris dresses are also pretty off in terms of silhouette. By the late 1860s, the silhouette had considerably flattened at the front, but hers is still pretty full. I do like that this overskirt is tabbed though, because it's a detail we see in late 60s fashion plates. Meg is a disaster throughout this whole movie fashion-wise. Her side-parted hair was not a thing, her long hair was not a thing, and her side ponytail was definitely not a thing. I understand why Durand might have wanted to design Meg as a pre-Raphaelite painting subject, but I just don't think it makes sense for her character. Yes, she's a romantic, but at the same time, she is concerned with social norms. She obviously pays attention to what's in fashion, and she doesn't seem to like standing out from the other girls either. This is why she freaks out when Jo accidentally burns some of her hair before a ball, why she puts on that silk dress for the Moffats ball, why she pretends to be a completely different person at the same ball, and why she felt she had to purchase fancy silk at the store. Meg is super concerned about propriety, so why is her hair always long when every respectable girl her age would put their hair up? It makes even less sense for her to wear it down for her wedding, which is definitely a symbolic moment of her growing into adulthood. Meg's dresses are also at questionably short lengths, which conflicts with her age. Only young girls could get away with shorter dresses. Meg's Moffat ball gown is pretty good. It's just strange that her dress fits her so well when it's technically borrowed. Also, don't even get me started on Meg's wedding gown. It looks straight up 1970s boho style. And Meg's dress here too. The silhouette is way too early 1860s. I know a lot of people have criticized this, but it's totally worth reiterating because if they did want to show a passage of time better, then it would make sense to really emphasize the silhouettes of the early 60s versus the late 60s versus the early 70s. I mean, I personally didn't have any issue understanding the timeline. I think the color grading was enough for that, but it's kind of just my expectation with any movie that takes place over an expanse of time. If we have a period movie set in the 2010s, you're not going to have the characters in the 2019 scene wearing fashion trends of 2011. You know, same kind of deal here. And you can argue, oh, Meg doesn't have money and she can't afford to keep up with the trends. But I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. While she doesn't have a lot of money, she does show interest in fashion. Meg, at least in the 1994 version, talked about how she would sew her own dresses.
But you had it made up so plain.
Oh, well, I do my own sewing and...
Mrs. Finster.
So it wouldn't actually be too costly for Meg to alter each dress to match the trending silhouette, especially because Isaac Singer really made some improvements in the sewing machine industry. There is further evidence that Meg keeps up with fashion because we can see her wearing a skirt with geometric trim. Skirts with bold geometric trims were in style in the early 1860s. For Beth, I don't have much to say. She's dressed very modestly. There's nothing particularly interesting about her clothes. They're quite consistently plain, but it makes sense for her. She's a no-frills kind of character and arguably the character that represents the idea of home the most, acting as a catalyst for Jo to start writing Little Women. So the last thing I want to say in this video is that historical accuracy is not the be-all, end-all. Like, I know I just went on this total rant, but it's not. Would it be nice if Gerwig had even a slight appreciation for bonnets? Well, yes. But honestly, I just wish that the two Little Women costume designs could just merge together. Because I like the historical accuracy of the 90s version, but I also like the idea of tailoring each character's clothing to reflect that character. Even though I was talking smack about the color palettes, I actually wouldn't be bothered if that was the only creative liberty. But the silhouettes, the incorrect undergarments, and the hair were pushing it way too much, to the point that it didn't even make sense for the character to look like that. Overall, I love this movie. It's just something to think about. Let me know what your thoughts are on Little Women, the 90s version versus the 2019 version. And also, let me know what March sister you think you connect with the most. For me, I am 95% Amy. I'll see you all next time, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your holiday season. Wait. Before you go, can we just appreciate Laurie's skating outfit for just a second? I'm pretty sure that his skating outfit is based on a Jackson Haynes skating uniform, which would make it pretty inaccurate for a normal person. Most Victorians just wore regular clothes to ice skate, but it's honestly a look, and since Laurie's got the money to make a custom suit, why not? I just wanted to point this outfit out because I'm not like as well versed in menswear, so I don't really want to talk about Laurie too much, but this is one of my favorite outfits in the entire movie, and I just wanted to bring attention to it very quickly. Now you can go.